In my area, I just got lucky. I mean, I had it reminded me of infantry AIT when you did the crawl through and the machine guns were going over your head, and they said don't get up, and because when I was crawling back pulling him, you guys were firing at them and they were firing at you, and it was crossfire. And if you stood up, you were pretty much finished. And all that time, Charlie was also engaged heavily. Charlie lost all their officers. The only officer they had left was the artillery forward observer, and they took a number of casualties. Not as many as Alpha Company. We got we had the bulk of the action. Bravo Company was coming up this way. Their mission was to get across this river and move in, and they did, and they had some contact, but not significant contact. I think they had just a couple people wounded, and they got there fairly late in the action. But Bravo was coming up from the south, and I think because of our attack, because of the air support and the artillery, and Charlie Company and then Bravo Company coming up, these guys, I think about 4:30 in the afternoon or 5 o'clock, decided they're going to get out of there because the fire fell off. When we went back out to pull people out of the field, there wasn't much fire at us at that time. When we approached the tree line, a helicopter came in from the east, and this was the most remarkable thing. About 5:30, 5:45, this Air Force helicopter came in right along the tree line, turned into the village, and landed right in here, and picked up that Civic Action Platoon, 5 or 6 guys. They were wounded. They had been in battle since the night before with all of the forces inside the village. They had a pretty well defended area, and I thought that chopper was going to go down, because if they were still at their full strength, or if they'd still been in the village, he would have gone down. But they landed in there, got those guys on, and moved them out. The Marines we found in the village killed were guys they had drug away from this 15 group that had come in the morning that were prisoners that got killed, and as they moved them through the village, either by our fire, their fire, whatever happened. They did have one prisoner of war from this that died, and one prisoner of war that later escaped from the Cap Echo group. And the Marines, when we had casualties in the field and we were pulling people back, 2 Marines came from the bridge. They left one there guarding the bridge, and they came over into the field, and they were carrying people back. And
that's the one that got you?
One of them carried me out from somewhere.
Yeah.
Him and Bunk come out and got me.
You know where you were on this picture?
Right in the middle, because Holmes' RTO, something happened, and I was FO for the third.
Yeah,
right.
But I was also RTing on for Holmes that day.
Yeah, you were Lieutenant Holmes?
Yeah.
You were over close to the CP with
I was
Brennan.
we was right in the middle of the 3rd platoon.
Right. Yeah, you've been right over here.
Interviewing different people, Claude Bartley,
Yeah.
his Silver Star, whatever he pulled over here to this side,
Right.
with the machine
was
gun,
Martacci and
M60.
Martacci.
Martacci Lop was there too?
Lop got killed
Jimmy
right
Lop
there.
was killed. He was the
While he was-
assistant gunner.
While they were doing that? Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
or
well,
before they got there.
They were putting down fire for us to
Right.
pull
Yeah.
back, and they got locked.
And they got lopped in.
And we went out to get lopped.
Because somebody told me afterwards when they were doing all these Valor Awards that was a big, huge thing that was positive so that everybody could come
Come
back.
back. Yeah, right.
It was Bartley laying
right.
down that field of
Laying
fire.
down a fire.
Yeah, yeah.
And Turner and I was shooting at that bell tower up here. Turner went over there close to them and was laying down a lot of fire. Because he had pulled over after Trachalik went down, and me and the medic went and got him.
Yeah, pointless this way.
So Turner had
There you go.
Turner had been right in about here,
Yeah.
And after Chichalik went down here, he pulled over here for a little while. And I think he was laying down fire with Murtachi and him, if I'm not mistaken.
And after you pass that ditch, that's where I mean, I'm just guessing, but that's probably where they came from behind you.
That's why I never knew that people were coming behind me.
Yeah.
No, we-
They'd come from three sides.
Yeah, they would do that as soon as they found out where you were. What their classic technique is to send companies against platoon-sized forces and send platoons against they'll go down your flanks and they'll try to surround you. They'll try to go down your flanks and surround you. And we think that inside this village, we've heard a lot of different numbers about what was in there. The most reasonable, I don't know that there's been enough. You get conflicting, guidance. I would think it would be an NVA battalion which has 600 people, and they have 6 companies of 100 each, and that kind of makes sense with what happened to Charlie Company, what happened over here, and what happened to us, and that from what I've read seems to be the most reasonable thing, that there were 6 companies of 100 each in there. And so we were looking at about 600. There could have been 2 battalions, but I have no idea, and I don't know what the official records record.
But it was mixed too. It was not just NVA.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you're
Lot of
right. So it would have been
Vietcong
supplemental. So it could have been maybe closer to 1,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're right. When they left and they took their prisoners of war and then they took a lot of their wounded and moved out. It was then that night we went back in and we were here, around the graveyard, and we were hit by the helicopter gunships that came down the river that were part of the Marine Corps security, and they had this helicopter with a big searchlight on it and then the gunships behind it. And they were coming down and they spotted us over here, and they started shooting, and then we had to do the hand flares and stuff to get them to stop. We weren't in direct communication. We weren't on the Marine Corps net. I mean, we did not have their frequencies. We did not, know who to call to get them to stop that stuff.
Backing up just a little bit, before y'all marched over here, one of the quotes of Captain Brennan was, when they got over here to this Marine commander, wherever y'all were, back over here somewhere, I assume.
Yeah, right.
That when he got to this Marine commander, he wasn't expecting y'all, didn't
No.
know you were coming.
No.
Didn't know what to do with you.
Yeah, he was setting he was setting way
Simplify,
over
buddy.
here on what was an LZ4 called LZ400, and that was the Marine Corps battalion base that we were assigned to. We were under that battalion commander, and they didn't know we were coming. And then when we got in there and got our supplies and we were ready to move out, what time did we leave there? About 10 at night or something?
Yeah.
And we marched.
Walked all night.
Yeah, we walked all night, and we walked over and we walked up the railroad line until we got almost to the river, and then we came across as a blocking force, because we had to protect this bridge, this part of the river for crossing, and the airfield was setting right here, and that was what was vulnerable.
One of the comments I heard that you made last night was the fact that, Brennan, you may have already said this, but that it would have really been an even bigger mess if Captain Brennan hadn't stopped everybody.
Yeah, and that's
And it was
second,
what, you said
that's
50
the-
meters from the tree line
But
about?
I think it was 50 meters from the tree line. I think Brennan thinks it was more like 100 meters
That's
from the
what I
tree
thought.
line.
That's what I felt.
And-
It was
and,
more
uh,
a little backward.
And I was just figuring, was there any room to put artillery rounds between us and the tree line, and there wasn't. And I thought what happened was the second platoon was absolutely closer to the tree line. If we were 100, they were 50, because what happened is this thing jogs out a little
Yeah,
bit.
exactly.
And I didn't show that here, but it comes across and jogs a little bit north and goes on across. And the second platoon was much closer to the tree line than the command group or the third.
Sure was.
Yeah.
Now,
Donnie last night was within 50 meters, I believe.
Yeah, and that's about right. Yeah, that would have been right.
I could see the whites of their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, that was,
And brown eyes.
now the NVA their mission was to, of course, I think you mentioned it, to take the Da Nang airstrip.
yes, and
But somewhere along the way, they screwed up.
They screwed up, and this guy that I talked to about, well, I talked to him through an interpreter about a month ago or less, 3 weeks ago. He says that they came in, and I don't know where they came in from, but they took a wrong turn at the river, and they ended up over here.
And they meant to
And
be
then,
over here.
and then we showed up, and they had no choice but to attack us.
There were 3 groups of NVA dead found that had 70 or more people in them. Does anybody know where those locations were? Anybody understand where that was?
No.
is it
Charlie Company had to kill a bunch. A Company killed a bunch. And who else would have done that? This Marine bunch might have.
I don't know how close he pinpointed it, but Johnston talks about where they were found, I think.
Yeah. There's three different big groups. Now, where are those tombs right now, Don, on that map? Can you figure out where they are?
They are somewhere over in here.
Okay. There's a memorial to all the
There's a
NVA.
memorial. See, they put in several new roads here,
right?
and
You can see that on the map
Yeah.
from Google. You come into
Like
Google, there's a big road coming across here this way.
exactly.
And,
And then there's a road, a smaller road that goes right up to the graveyard, right up to the entrance of it. And there's a house sitting right on the corner. Well, I can't remember which corner. I remember where we were at. We drove around so much before we found this place.
Right.
I was totally disoriented. And everything has changed so much.
40 years.
And once you get on this big trail that comes across, I mean, the one that goes to the cemetery, and you kind of get situated, then you can see it all.
Yeah.
You know, even though it's a lot smaller because it's been cut up and regraded and all kind of stuff. But there was that little road that the people lined up on. It was over there. It's still there, but it was gravel. But now it's paved.
Right, yeah.
And then the little road going from the village to it is visible, but it's pretty good size. It used to be a trail.
Right.
About maybe a Lambretta could have gone down it, but now you could drive a truck down it. And you can drive a vehicle almost what used to be trails are now pretty good sized roads.
Even if you were a little disoriented on where things might have been there, the guys from Cap Echo 4, one of those guys who was the NCOIC of that group, went back, and he swears the Cap Echo 4 wasn't there, it was over here. It wasn't, because when you look at the after action reports on the Marine Corps side and where they told us their locations were, it was here. And I saw the helicopter come in there and pull them out.
Where did the NVA, which direction did they retreat? Number one, and where did they find, we had 4 guys that were located the next day, Larry. Do you remember that? You remember reading about that, I know.
You mean our guys?
Our KIAs, 4 of our
KIAs.
KIAs were found the next day, and they were away from the
Away
actual
from the
battle.
actual, yeah. And they're on an after action report,
remember
and they're
that.
identified as to where they were located. And I don't have that with me, so I can't tell you.
Yeah.
My understanding is that these guys went this direction. They went,
Yeah.
and they went out towards the east, a little bit south. And they had sympathizers all in this area over in here. In fact, when it was very interesting when we left and went east the next morning and went over into this area on a search mission, and if you went into a village that had the little crosses on them for the Catholic churches, they were okay. Those were friendly villages. If you went in, and it was a Buddhist temple symbols, then you had to be really, really careful.
Just out of curiosity, does anybody have good solid memories of what happened like the next 3 or 4 days, the ones of y'all that stayed out in the field? Anybody remember anything?
All I remember is it seemed like the place was almost totally deserted. These areas units.
Yeah, yeah, they were.
I guess,
Yep.
I didn't remember the one prisoner.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was just, when we started to cross the patty that morning, we didn't go too far when an NVA stood up and started to shoot at Hacker, and I yelled at Hacker and he killed him. And then from then on, I don't remember seeing another person all day.
Yeah,
I
and-
mean, we saw blood trails, we found weapons, etc., but no people walking around.
And before we moved in, remember before we moved in that morning back into the village, I ran artillery all the way down the line. I started up here at the, close to the highway, and ran artillery fire all the way down the tree line, and mixed HE and VT and
Do you remember what battery,
had
First and
socket.
14th, that you were using for fire?
yeah, that came up there. No, I can find out. That's easy.
Because I was with Charlie Battery.
Yeah.
and I might have been the one giving directions for the fire.
Right.
For the support.
Yep. Because they had, I can't remember which battery, but it's in the after-action report. And the after-action report's about 24 pages. And it's what people recollect at the time and pulled together. It's a lot of the information that you had transcribed from, Brennan's stuff and what they had pulled together. And it tells where people were at different times of the day, where the different units were. And it's nice that they tried to go in for a unit award, because the best history is if somebody wins a major unit award like the Valorous Unit Citation or Presidential Unit Citation, because they have to pull together all this documentation, and that documentation doesn't exist for, like, Hill 352 and all of that. There was nobody, there's scant information. You have to pull it together out of awards and other peripheral information. There were no good journal entries. Yet the battalion lost 30 killed, 191 wounded, and in the last week of April and through May, out around LZ Center, that was our biggest casualties, and there's virtually nothing in the record about that
For
action.
April and May.
For April and May.